Thank you very much. Thanks. On behalf of Vice Admiral Bono, I can't tell you how honored she feels to receive this leadership award. She was saying, we were talking about the award before she had to leave town, and she said, really, the value of any of these awards that are handed out are who's giving them. And when she thinks about the mission of the Women's Center, it just touches her heart. We both look back in our careers, and it was really people like you sitting there, also family, people who believe in you before they think you're going to be a brigadier general or a vice admiral. They don't know that. They see something in you, and they're willing to take that dignity that you have and help rise you up higher than you thought you would be able to achieve on your own. It's a big deal. We also, when you look at the military, and I'm very close to hitting my 27th year in, I sit there and look at why we've succeeded, and I really believe that it's because our leaders understand the importance of diversity. And I don't mean diversity just for diversity. I'm talking about that diversity of thought, the diversity of where you come from in making decisions, bringing people into the room that all come from different backgrounds, have different experiences, and are able to help come together and look at things like healthcare in the United States, or world health across the world, or world peace, figure out what it is. But if you're trying to do that with all the same people sitting around the table, you're not going to come up with the out-of-the-box decisions that we really need to move our world forward. And being in the military, it's sort of interesting. You look around and you say, we're supposed to represent our country, right? And so how important is it? And Admiral Bono and I talk about this a lot. When we first came in, there really weren't a lot of females in our medical community. She was the only surgical resident in her particular class. I was one of two in our 6 females in my dental class, and yet now you look at dental schools, and in some schools, 50% of the graduates are female. I mean, it's a great change, right? And I don't want to say females are better, but come on, I've got small hands. So from a dental perspective, that obviously comes in very handy. But I look around the room, and I think it's important for you to listen. I met some great leaders here today, and the energy in the room is incredible. But I think what you really gain is the stories of how people ended up where they are. So I'd like to share a little bit of mine. I came into the military in 1992. I came in planning to do a 1-year general practice residency. I was going to pay off my 2 years, and I was going to get out. That was my plan. Then I would get my private practice. I'd make a ton of money. It would be awesome. It didn't quite work out that way, as you probably recognize. I'm still wearing the uniform. But I came in, and when we go through officer training, you go through I'd say grueling. Back then it wasn't that grueling. It is now. But we would go through a few weeks of being out in the field and learning how to wear the uniform and all that encompasses being an officer, because we come in as a dentist, but what they really need us to serve as is a military officer. And so at the very end, they always have a dining in. And a dining in is kind of a fancy party where we wear our military fancy outfit. For females, it's not that fancy. It doesn't look that great, but it's a long skirt with a jacket, no name. So I had my one ribbon, which, you know, I watched CNN during the Gulf War because I had done nothing, but I did have a ribbon, and no name tag. And we are always hosted by a senior leader. So we had a 2-star general. His name was Billy McCoy. He flew F-4s in Vietnam, and he was currently flying A-10s, and he was in San Antonio, and he was going to host all these brand new medics. And he kept looking at me, and I'm like, oh, you know, what have I done wrong? Still kind of finding my way around. And he finally came over, and he goes, Captain, what's your last name? And I said, Rush. And he said, R-U-S-C-H. He said, I flew with your dad. And he said, I recognize you from pictures of when you couldn't have been older than 6. And I sat there and thought, okay, here's a man I've never met. He recognizes me 20 years later from pictures. And I realized that I was joining something bigger than myself. And so when we sit there and talk about leadership, I think that's important. But you've got to understand the rest of the story. My dad was shot down over Laos 3 days before my 6th birthday. So I never saw him after that. So he actually saw my dad before. He saw him more recently than I had. And he sat there and told the story of that day. He remembered every bit of my dad not coming back. He was missing in action until they say missing in action, and then they change it to killed in action, but they don't really know. And you go to a memorial, and everyone's like, oh, you can cry. And I'm like, oh, yesterday, today, no difference. But in 2007, they brought back his remains and were able to identify him through dental remains. And so I brought him back. I went to Hawaii, picked him up, and buried him in Arlington. And I think the importance of this story really isn't about my dad. I didn't come in. People are always like, oh, did you come in and serve because of your dad? I really didn't, but that's why I stayed. Once I started realizing what I was doing, it really made a difference. And Admiral Bono talks about this all the time. We are responsible for the health care for 10 million people currently serving, their families, people who have served in the past. And every time I see somebody, whether it's in the chair, and yes, I still see patients, not as much as I'd like, but when I sit down and I look at them and I realize that these guys were the age my dad was when he was shot down, I'm thinking, you know, these people sitting in the chair are willing to give absolutely everything for our country. And it warms my heart. Like I said, it's bigger than me. It's not about me. And you think about it, we're a $50 billion healthcare industry. We're pretty big. But that $50 billion, when you think about it, you think about bringing our people wounded back from Iraq and Afghanistan. If they make it to one of our facilities, they have a 98% chance of living. That's better than any. Thanks. But that's better than most of our emergency rooms in the United States. So how can we partner? How can we all be better by working together? And when I'm very blessed to work for Vice Admiral Bono, but she has that vision. You know, yeah, we're undergoing the biggest reform that we have ever gone through in terms of medical reform within the Department of Defense. But it's bigger than that because she sees that vision. If we get it right, we work closely with the VA. If the VA gets it right, then we can change healthcare everywhere, right? How many people in the healthcare industry out there? Oh, come on, one. Well, you care. How many people use healthcare out in? There you go. But I think it's important going forward to realize that we have that opportunity to change the world. So when people say, what is the advice I've given? I stayed in because this became something so much larger than anything I could do. I never came in thinking that I would be a general. I didn't come in thinking I'd be a major. But it's one of those things that I have had people, just like the Women's Center does, that helps you get through those times, supports you. You are developing this support network that lasts a lifetime. Change tables at the breaks. Meet new people. Share business cards, do something, because this is the group that can bring us all up higher than we ever thought we would get. I love finding our young airmen. I just retired a chief down in San Antonio who had put in 30 years, 18 days. She was very quick to tell me. But when she came in, she got in all kinds of trouble in her first 2 assignments. I mean, she had what we call Article 15s. That means you did something really bad. But she had people that believed in her. She didn't believe in herself as much as the people around her believed in her. And it changed her life. And she became one of the most senior enlisted leaders within our Air Force. I was so proud of her. And I'm just standing up there going, gosh, it's just amazing. Our opportunities are endless if we're able to bring each other up together. I read on Facebook the other day, I am kind of one of those Facebook people, so this will be posted really quickly, I promise. But I read on Facebook, behind every strong woman is a strong woman. And that couldn't be more true, right? But I also don't want to underestimate the power of our male leaders that are also recognizing how important the diversity is in having strong female leaders. Our companies are better because of it. I know you have a lot of male speakers today as well. That's exciting. You know, how can we learn from each other? How can we bring some of our strengths to the room? I still cry during the national anthem. I cry during retirements. I get tears in my eyes. It matters to me. I'm okay with that. That's who I am. I'm not different or feel like I have to conform to be in a particular role. I know I take care of my people. I know I take care of the mission. And I know I'm absolutely passionate about what I do. So keep that passion. I know that Admiral Bono always talks about 3 things. She talks about competency. Do the best you can with what you're given. You have a lot of opportunities for education. Today's world is amazing. You can learn things online. You can go to universities that are very supportive in trying to raise all of our world up, but definitely our women who may not see that they have that opportunity. You've got to make sure that you have confidence. And confidence doesn't mean you think you can do everything right. It's that willingness to raise your hand and stand up. Offer some of your recommendations to make the world a better place. Your voice matters. Don't sit back. If you have something to say that's going to make something better, please raise your hand. And then I always add that 3rd one, and that's commitment. Be committed to what you're going to do. Every day that I get up, and I always say when you go to bed and you say, is this really what I should do? Start thinking about what you should do next. But every day that I go to bed, I sit there and think how blessed I am to take care of our nation's heroes and to interact with professionals like you as we start looking at ways to make this country a better place. Now, they haven't held up my sign yet, and I am from the Chicago area, so I talk fast. I can get like a 2-hour talk in 20 minutes easily. But I do think that the value of today, and I know they talked about that earlier today, is the interaction that you have with each other. So what we're hoping is that we can also answer some questions. I want to thank all of you for the flexibility. Vice Admiral Bono would really like to be here, but I can tell you that her award means so much to her, and it will have a very prominent spot right down the street in the Defense Health Agency. So with that, I'd just like to thank everybody, and we're going to open up for questions, and it looks like she already has some. I bet they were planted, but that's okay.
How did you guess? And please give those cards to the volunteers with your questions, and they'll pass them up to me. So what a story. Your dad in Vietnam. Tell us more. Did your expertise as a dentist help you identify him?
So it did not, and that's a common question I get. Although when I went to pick him up, the one thing, and I didn't think it would bother me that much. I mean, it had been over 30 years since I'd lost my dad, and I walked into the room, and they had a gray blanket laid out, and they brought this bag so carefully to me with the 2 teeth, but it also had a sheet with the radiographs. The radiographs from before he died, and then the radiographs they take afterwards. And in dental forensics, and we sit there and talk about why do you need dentists in the military. Dental is actually one of the largest areas of care delivered in a deployed location, about 15 to 20%. So when it's really important that we train our dentists to have that whole spectrum of care ability. They need to know how to do root canals. Guess what? They need to know how to do root canals on dogs, because we have dogs, we have canines out there, and it's mission stoppage if you can't take care of them. We need to be able to do forensic identification. So I had extensive training, and I speak at forensics courses now. But for me, that was the ability to sit down and look at those radiographs and to hold the teeth in my hand was the first time I'd really cried about any of this, because it was the first time I realized he was actually home. And so that was really significant for me, but I do get that question a lot. I do want to back up a little because any single parents in the room? A couple? Yeah. I just want to give a shout out to my mom. I talk to my dad all the time, but you think about it. My dad was lost right before I turned 6. My mom, bless her heart, you know, she was making minimum wage, 2 kids. I have a daughter. I have a sister that's 2.5 years younger than I am, and she worked so incredibly hard. I sit there and think about it. I never felt like I was poor. We were dirt poor. We were sharing a 2-bedroom apartment. My sister and I were a huge pain to my mom. It's just amazing that she was able to put up, but she was the good parent and the bad parent, and getting us to schools and encouraging us. And when I sit there and think about, again, back to the Women's Center, how do you encourage children to do everything they can and give them that strength within themselves when she was doing everything herself? But I remember when I was in 5th grade, things weren't going well for me. I had some problems walking, and my mom took me to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician told me I was faking for attention. Well, my mom said, yeah, no, that's not Sharon. Sharon doesn't ever complain about anything. But she listened to the doctor, and about 6-7 months later, things were getting worse, and my face was getting all puffy, and my aunt, who was a nurse, said, I think she has cancer. And so my mom then, of course, flipped out. Now here's single mom, not making much money, 2 kids. The last thing she needed was a daughter with a problem. Well, they took me in, and sure enough, I had a tumor about the size of an orange in my pelvic bone. And if I had walked a couple more days, it would have broken through, and I would have been in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So this is, you know, of course, my mom, in today's world, we'd probably be really rich right now. But we were not. But my mom was so upset with the pediatrician because she knew better. But again, this is adding so much stress to her. And then we were working, back then it wasn't the TRICARE health plan, it was Champus. And my mom was having all kinds of problems with the health plan. You know, how do I get her this care? She makes no money. Yeah, she's covered through her dad on the Champus, and it's just a disaster. And I remember just sitting there, and I spent almost a year in and out of the hospital. Luckily, it wasn't. It was benign. It wasn't malignant. So, I'm fine. I can still run. Not great, but I could run. But I could remember sometimes listening to her cry at night, and she never wanted us to hear, but we would hear it. And I thought, you know, she's working really hard for us. That didn't mean we weren't still a pain, but she was trying so hard, and I think it instilled that ability for us to give it absolutely everything we can. And so when we talk about commitment and we talk about courage, we really have to realize that we've got more strength than we realize we have alone. But I watched my mom, and she gave us that strength. My sister, she's a world-class athlete. She cycles professionally and has done amazing things. She cycled the Ho Chi Minh Trail, stopped at my dad's crash site in Laos. And with that, just won an Emmy for the documentary that was put out. It's called Blood Road. So my point is it was the 3 of us. It was my mom, it was my sister, and it was myself. And all 3 of us did okay. So for anybody out there that sometimes thinks maybe you need that extra little help, call me. I mean, I'm in the military. You can find anything about me. You can find where I live, my address, how much I make. You know, it's awesome. But I just want to offer that up because I think it's important. I know I'm almost out of my time. Do you have another question?
I have more questions.
Okay, I'm ready.
We have some things. We want to know more about you.
More about me?
Well, actually this one, I'll go with this audience question. So many of us in this room are in other industries but the military, and there's still a bit of bias around gender, perhaps. But it seems that the military is role modeling diversity more so. And the question really is, what can we learn from the military about seeing past gender, color, and anything else human?
Well, the military is interesting. We have every kind of person in the military. We're very diverse when you look around. Where we were having struggles in the past is that diversity at the senior level. And we weren't really sure what it was. I can tell you some. I mean, when you are working, there are certain steps you have to make to get promoted. And sometimes life comes in between that. But our current secretary of the Air Force, oh my gosh, she's like, listen, you guys need more time off when you have kids. Got it through. So I think that some of it is making sure that our community supports families, supports when your children are in high school. Please don't move them. Now, the more senior we get, a little harder it is to do that. But I think that they've realized that and how that diversity plays. I want to bring up, we have 4 3-star generals in the military health system. So we have Admiral Faison, who's for the Navy, Admiral Bono, who is the DHA, Air Force is General Hogg, and the Army is General West. Ask how many of those are females. Not all of them, but 3 of them. That's pretty darn good, right? So I think the important part is us getting out so that people that are sitting out there, especially our young airmen, soldiers, sailors, and Marines, when they first come in, they need to look up and see people that look like them. And I don't care if it's that you're female, I don't care that it's if you're black, I don't care if it's that you have different, whatever it is. If you like to play Candy Crush, you don't want to have people judge you because of how you look. You want them to accept you and understand what you bring to the table so that we can make the best decisions possible. And for us in the military, that's a national defense priority. We have to be able to do that right. Yeah.
So you've had a fabulous career. You're a general in the military. That's not a small feat in what was really a male-dominated kind of an organization. So you've risen through the ranks. What would you say is that core attribute in your leadership that helped and propelled you up the ladder?
I would say just use your networks to have the confidence to keep moving forward. I have 2 very strong daughters. I have one at UVA. Go UVA! and I have one who's a sophomore in San Antonio in high school that is in JROTC. And watching her, even thinking about my girls, I get tears in my eyes because I'm raising 2 kids that are just as strong as my mom was, as I watched my sister being, and that's how we keep propelling people forward. And I think I'm getting the hook. Yeah. That's the hook, isn't it?
Well,
I saw the 5-minute. But I just want to thank you. The energy in here is amazing. Being able to start off your conference is truly a privilege for me. So as much as I wish Admiral Bono didn't have something else to do, this really turned out amazing for me. So for all of you, thanks for what you do. Don't tell my boss that.
Well, thank you so very much.
And I wish I could stay longer with you today, but this was a little unexpected. Thank you for everything, and I'm very excited for what you're doing.
Wonderful role model, and thank you for sharing your lessons about passion, commitment, courage.
Thank you very much.
That is what we want to remember from your talk today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.